Okay, question 2. A researcher thinks that modern Thai dogs may be descendants of golden jackals. A random sample of 16 animals was collected from each of the two populations. The length in millimeters of the mandible jawbone was measured for each animal. The lower quartile, median, and upper quartile for each sample are shown in the table below, along with all values below the lower quartile and the values above the upper quartile. Letter A says display parallel box plots of mandible lengths showing outliers, if any, for the modern Thai dogs and the golden jackals on the grid below. This is Unit 1 stuff, so good little review here. Well, let's start with what we have. We have the Q1, median, and Q3. So our median for, we'll say, modern Thai dog. We'll do that one up here. And our median's at 125. So with the box plot, we're talking about something that looks like this. Our Q3 is 128, so maybe about right there. And our Q1 is at 121. And we have some values above the upper quartile and below lower quartile. This is going to be your max, but we're not told really if these are outliers. This is going to be your min. So we have to kind of use the 1.5 IQR rule. So we can do that just by, if you remember, for any upper outliers are going to be anything greater than 1.5 IQR added to Q3. And then any lower outliers are going to be anything less than Q1 minus 1.5 IQR. Let's do that real quick here. IQR 128 minus 121. That IQR is going to be 7. So 1.5 times 7. And half of 7 is 3.5. So it's going to be 10.5. You can double check that. So anything, if I add 10.5 to Q3, that's going to be 128 plus 10.5. So 128 plus 10.5. So anything above 138.5 is an upper outlier. We're good here. Anything below, let's see, 121 minus 10.5. So anything below 110.5 is a lower outlier. So there are no outliers here. So we'll go ahead and fix that here, finish that up. That means we can safely end our whiskers at the maximum and lowest value. So 132 is going to be about right there. And 114 is going to be about right there. And looks fairly symmetric, no strong skew. So let's go on to the next one. We got modern Thai, we got a golden jackal down here. And we got our median at 108, so that'll be somewhere around there. Our Q3 is at 112. And our Q1 is at 107, so that's going to be right below, actually. Probably should shift these a little bit further, but that's all right. So that's our box. And as far as our numbers go on the edge, let's do our 1.5 IQR. So our IQR, Q3 minus Q1, that's going to be 5. So 1.5 IQR, 1.5 times 5 is going to be, let's see, 2.5 plus 5, 7.5. And I want to add that to Q3. So anything above 112 plus 7.5. So that's going to be 119.5. And anything below 107 minus 7.5. So we're talking 90.5. So I don't have any lower outliers. So I can go ahead and go to 104 and make my whisker end. But sorry for my horrible graph there. And my upper outlier, anything above 119.5. Well, I have 3 values. So I'm going to end this at 114. And then I'm going to just put these 3 outliers just on these plots, 122, 124, 125. So talking maybe 22, just eyeballing these 24 and 25. And so there are your graphs. Let's look at part B. Based on the dot plots above, write a few sentences comparing the distributions of the mandible lengths for the two types of dogs. Well, this is kind of a throwback question, but remember for these ones, you want to do shape, possible outliers, center, and the variability. So let's compare the shapes first. I would say for modern Thai, that seems to be roughly symmetric. Yikes. All right, just for ease, I just kind of typed this all out. Let's go over what's going on with this. So we want to do our SOC-B on these type of problems: shape, possible outliers, center, and variability. So if you recall this from unit 1, going way back there, we just kind of discussed the shapes of these. The modern Thai is going to be roughly symmetric, while the golden jackal seems to be skewed to the right because of these outliers out here. Speaking of outliers, we want to include those in our description. So modern Thai has no outliers, but the golden jackal has 3 outliers, and list those outliers: 122, 124, and 125. I want to compare the centers. So the medians are good measures of centers. We don't have all the data, so we don't even know the means anyway, but the medians here, modern Thai has a bigger median than the golden jackal. And for the variability, we're going to be talking about the spread. You can talk about the overall range. Obviously, the golden jackal, if you include the outliers, is definitely more spread out. But if you're just talking about the IQR, the modern Thai, 50% of its data is between the Q1 and Q3, and that's a little bit actually more 7 than that of the golden jackal. So when comparing distributions, especially with outliers, it's important to use IQR because that's resistant to outliers. So that's a good measure of spread there. All right, next part of the video. Letter B, is it reasonable to use the sample of mandible lengths of modern Thai dogs to construct an interval estimate of the mean mandible length for the population of modern Thai dogs? And basically, this is just taking the normal distribution, or checking the conditions for these. So for our conditions here, we want to say, are we meeting the random approximately normal and the 10%? And the whole point of doing these graphs was to check that approximately normal conditions. See, for modern Thai, we don't have any skewness or strong outliers. And if you look over here, it says a random sample of 16 animals was collected for each of the 2 populations. And we also know that 16 is less than 10% of all the animals that would exist in this population. So we've met those 2 conditions. And because of this graph, we've now met the approximately normal condition. So I'm not going to write all this out, but it's a random sample. We've met the condition there. And of course, we're not sampling more than 10%. So I'm going to just say yes here. I don't have the full explanation on the answer, but you can see it on the answer key. The next part, is it reasonable to use the sample data of mandible lengths of modern Thai dogs and the sample of mandible lengths of golden jackals to perform a 2-sample t-test for the difference in means? And so while we've met the modern Thai dog's normal condition, the problem is the golden jackals has that outliers, right? So normal condition is not met for that sample. So even if we have the independent, the 10% and the random, we have not met the normal condition for specifically that group of golden jackals. So the answer would be no in this case. All right, next video we'll go over example 3.